Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. We have a massive, huge, bombastic stream today. I'm so excited to talk about all of our news stories. We have a lot of different Spider Man stories to talk about today, whether it be about Spider Man's Ultimate series, whether it be about some of these Spider Man plot threads lingering over in Dark X-Men. There's just a lot of really, really interesting Spider Man adjacent content across the Marvel Universe that we're going to get into today. Really hope you enjoyed the week of videos we had over on the channel. I know we came out with a few less than usual, but I had a lot of fun putting them together this week. Um, I was really happy with this issue of Amazing Spider Man. Frankly, I just think the personality of Rec Rap and some of the locations within Limbo really help give that book some interesting, like humor based scenarios. And I think just does a wonderful job playing up some of the darker elements of Spider Man. Another aspect of Limbo that I think is just so interesting is how we don't get it often enough over in the Marvel Universe or with these Spider Man titles. And I really think just anytime we combine those elements together, I oftentimes find myself more interested, more fascinated to check out some of these Spider Man series. Elsewhere, we covered Birds of Prey. That series is fantastic. Let me tell you, some of the artwork from Leonardo Romero is just so beautiful. It just feels like the execution of that book is even better than what you'd expect to see in terms of some of those comics. Just a fantastic series. And I love how that book is really using some of those elements over from Wonder Woman and, Themyscira to really kind of fuel the narrative over in that series. Really cannot recommend it enough. Or in terms of X-Men Red, I think that book is also phenomenal, featuring just a super climactic next step over for Storm during the Genesis War. It has felt to me like in certain X-Men Red issues, there's been a little bit of a problem where some of the narrative hasn't quite come full circle, and I really think this last issue of the series just did a fantastic job powering up Storm, levying her against Apocalypse, and just putting, or not against Apocalypse, but against Genesis, and just really heading into some climactic final moments over in the Genesis War. I think we're on board for some really fantastic material here. Very excited to see how all these X-Men comics start winding down in the lead up to the next X-Men relaunch, too. I know that's just on the horizon here. Okay, and we'll be starting in just a few moments here. Really appreciate you coming to check out our stream today. Hello, everybody. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I want to officially welcome you to our stream. As mentioned up top here, we have so many fantastic news stories featuring a lot of Spider Man content in particular. Plus, we're going to be exploring some upcoming DC announcements later on in the stream. We have so many action packed news announcements. Hello, everybody. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I want to formally welcome you over to our live stream this Saturday. As mentioned previously here, we're really going to dive into some ancillary Spider-Man series and see just in general what Marvel has in store. I feel like there's so many just fantastic X-Men comics coming out as a part of Fall of X. I'm so excited to explore some of the upcoming preview pages over for Dark X-Men. I already had a chance to look at them. I already saw that the Orcus agents of Krull and Valens have returned alongside the kind of different version of Madeline Pryor. We're going to have so much fun diving into that series later on in the stream. We're also going to be exploring what's happening over in Ultimate Spider-Man with a brand new Goblin character. Plus, I'm even going to find some time over in this stream to talk a little bit about the Outsiders comic book series with you. This is really interesting because it's almost like DC following up on a spiritual successor over to the Planetary comic book from Warren Ellis and John Cassaday that I just know so many comic book readers have some warm and fuzzy feelings for. I want you to pack in because this is going to be just a fantastic, excellent stream here. Afro SF, greetings, Arakko Braddock. I'm looking forward to your stream. I bought Gods 2, Ultimate Universe #1, and Captain America 2 today. Gods, we're going to talk about. I know I didn't have a full review over for Gods, but there is still quite a lot to say in terms of that series, and really particularly with how Jonathan Hickman writes scripts. As we mentioned earlier on our last stream, Afro SF, I was a lot happier with Ultimate Universe. I thought Jonathan Hickman did a really good job paring down his dialogue in terms of that. Captain America 2, I love that comic book. I wish there was more time in the day. I would absolutely cover that JMS and Jesus Says book. That book is phenomenal. The way it kind of mixes up these supernatural elements along with like the secret history of Steve Rogers is just absolutely phenomenal. All right, so without further ado here, we're going to go ahead and kick off our coverage for the day by exploring some of the teams that Captain Marvel has previously led, all leading up to the latest Avengers team. Let's go ahead and check this one out over on Marvel.com. Let's see here. All the teams Captain Marvel has led, Carol Danvers, also known as Captain Marvel, is one of Earth's mightiest heroes and leaders. Though Captain Marvel is among Earth's mightiest heroes, her exemplary superhero service extends to so much more than the Avengers. Carol Danvers has been a prominent part of so many active teams throughout the Marvel Universe, saving the day wherever she can as she puts her immense powers to good use, pushing herself higher, further, and faster with many iconic teammates. More than just a solid team player, Captain Marvel has proved herself an effective leader with multiple ensembles. All right, so this first team that it looks like she led was the Avengers. Ever since debuting her first superhero persona as Miss Marvel, the team that Carol Danvers has been linked with most often is the Avengers. In the wake of Civil War, the Avengers split into two opposing teams, being New Avengers and Mighty Avengers, with the latter enforcing the Superhuman Registration Act. Carol took charge of the Mighty Avengers, and in this tense time for the Marvel Universe, starting by leading the heroes against a resurgent and a more formidable Ultron. I remember when I was reading these comics, I was so interested in the idea of like dual Avengers teams over with New Avengers and Mighty Avengers. I also found that this Mighty Avengers team filled with characters like Wonder Man, Sentry, Ares, Iron Man, we have Carol Danvers as well, Black Widow. I think this is a really, really great team. I don't really think this series ever really lived up to its full potential, and I even think that some of the aspects of it are even more interesting than the New Avengers roster around that time. I almost wish Marvel would try publishing this team again because I think they're so subversive and interesting. Yes, around 2016, in terms of the X-Men, there was a long period where Carol was leading the Alpha Flight, curiously enough. In the face of growing extraterrestrial threats, a new version of the classic superhero team Alpha Flight formed in the aftermath of Secret Wars. Man, just as an aside here, is Secret Wars the best Marvel event from 2015? It's definitely got to be up there. Jason, welcome to the stream. Good to have you aboard here today. We are just checking out some of the teams that Captain Marvel Carol Danvers has led in anticipation of some of our other bigger news stories headed just on the horizon for our stream today. Captain Marvel was placed in charge of this new initiative, monitoring incoming alien activity from an orbital headquarters positioned above the Triskelion in New York City. Alpha Flight was effectively the first line of defense for Earth from otherworldly danger coming in from the cosmos, making Captain Marvel's extensive experience combating enemies like the Kree and Skrulls invaluable. Just wanted to quickly say here that in terms of Captain Marvel, once again, I don't think this series lived up to its full potential, really, but I also think the sci-fi backdrop over for the Alpha Flight and this really ambitious premise is definitely intriguing. I know Alpha Flight right now is back to more of a basics approach, and we have Carol in her own solo series and in the Avengers, but I definitely think that this is a really fascinating point in Captain Marvel's career. I'm actually not familiar with Carol Danvers' tenure over in the Ultimates. Let's learn a little bit more about this. This is Ultimate Avengers vs. New Ultimates from 2011. In the Ultimate Universe, Ultimate Carol Danvers succeeded Nick Fury as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., placing her at the center of all its superhero activity. Through this important decision, Carol led the new Ultimates, the latest iteration of the Ultimate Universe's version of the Avengers. In the immediate aftermath of the earth shattering event crossover Ultimatum, Carol quickly proved herself a formidable commander of the universe's greatest heroes, compelling a renewed attempt by Loki to invade Earth in Ultimate Comics' New Ultimates. Yeah, so this is a really kind of basic Ultimates approach over to the team, but I do think that mixing up the roster with Carol Danvers as the leader for some reason is interesting enough to create a new status quo or new stories over at Marvel. Frankly, I would love it if maybe Jonathan Hickman rounded out his Ultimates roster with Ultimate Carol Danvers and maybe had a new status quo direction or idea in terms of that. Really cool idea here. I'd love for Marvel to return to Ultimate Carol Danvers very soon. Carol Core. In the epic crossover event Secret Wars 2015, shout out to Jason here, the multiverse was condensed into a single composite realm known as Battle World, where alternate versions of different characters interacted with each other. A group of multiversal Carol Danvers formed the Carol Corps, with the all unique forms of Carol making up a high flying squadron that flies above the skies of Battleworld based out of Hala Field. The squadron takes on the Thor Corps, Battleworld's police force, and the miniseries Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps. Captain Marvel and the Carol Corps. Through the multiverse was eventually reborn, with each of the Carols returning to their respective realities. The Carol Corps would continue beyond the events of Secret Wars. When new threats to the multiverse arose, the Carol Corps assembled to defend it in Avengers Forever, taking on the multiversal Masters of Evil. Yeah, as you can see here, recent Marvel comics really create just the most insane story scenarios and make these like histories of characters seem really busy in some of their last like retrospective years over in the Marvel universe. Carol Danvers has been around for a while, but as recently as 2016, she was like operating out of this space station. Over in 2015, she's operating an entire corps of heroes. Yeah, Carol Danvers' last like 5 or 6 years have been just incredibly busy over in the Marvel universe. Also, I want to ask anybody in chat. I haven't had the chance to see the Marvels yet. Has anybody else had the opportunity to see it? Does anybody have any first impressions? Let me know. A-Force and Beyond. Yeah, this was yet another recent story over at Marvel, combining all the female heroes over in the Marvel Universe. Once again, this is a comic book that I was really highly anticipating, but I don't think really lived up to its full potential. I feel like there was a period around like 2015, 2016, where there were all these releases that Marvel didn't invest like a lot of like thought or after ideas into here. Another superhero team debuting in Secret Wars was the all-female Avengers ensemble A-Force, a group of women heroes that teamed following She-Hulk's lead on Battleworld. Among the most prominent members of the team was Captain Marvel, who led her vital support as they confronted the Thor Corps and Marvel zombies. After the multiverse's rebirth, A-Force reformed in the primary Marvel universe, with Captain Marvel continuing her membership on the team. A-Force was rocked to its foundation with the onset of the fiery crossover event Civil War II, with She-Hulk gravely incapacitated in a fight against Thanos. All right, but just to be clear, we don't talk about Civil War II. Is that correct? I believe so. I believe so. Civil War I, we barely comprehend, we barely acknowledge in terms of Marvel's continuity, but we dare not explore or venture any further into Civil War II. All right, well, that was a very brief look at some of Miss Marvel's very recent career history, leading superhero teams over in the Marvel Universe. Of course, right now, she's operating alongside the Avengers over in Jed MacKay and CF Via's really epic run over on the team. While I keep criticizing that title because they haven't really moved forward in terms of some of the plotting in quite some time, it really looks like this upcoming Avengers series is set to get back on track with upcoming issues, as the Avengers are likely set to team up with the character of Kang to fight off Murden and the Twilight Court here. we will continue our endless coverage of the new Avengers series as the days and streams go by here. All right, so with that kind of refresher news story out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about some brand new news stories over in Marvel. Really glad to see Grayson Red acknowledge that we do not speak of Civil War II over on the stream. I'm really happy that I'm not alone here. So I feel like there is so much potential in the upcoming Avengers Twilight comic book series coming in over from Chip Zdarsky and Daniel Acuna. Really liking this kind of Kingdom Come-esque approach featuring an alternate future over in the Marvel Universe with certain characters getting redesigned appearances. Today we have this gorgeous Alex Ross illustrated cover for this future version of Miss Marvel that I think is so fascinating to comprehend here. I am such a big fan of how much detail Alex Ross really instills in terms of the facial details of his characters. Love the fact that he includes like this pronounced chin that's not very visually appealing, but creates a more kind of like direct and complete facial expression over for the character. Very happy with the approach that Marvel is issuing with Avengers Twilight. I think one of the biggest things I'm worried about in terms of this series, especially given Chip Zdarsky's recent scripts over on Batman, is the fact that he seems to really enjoy writing these violent scenarios over for characters. And I think that Chip really needs to balance this kind of far future violence alongside the pathos and the characters of these Marvel heroes. Let's learn a little bit more about the backdrop of Avengers Twilight and the coming of Miss Marvel over in this news story coming in from Marvel on November 9th. Meet the Miss Marvel of tomorrow in new Avengers Twilight comic book covers. Check out 3 covers for Avengers Twilight 3. The fate of Earth's mightiest heroes is darker than you imagined. Starting this January, witness the breathtaking vision of Marvel's tomorrow in Avengers Twilight, an epic new limited series from 2 of the industry's hottest talents, Chip Zdarsky and artist Daniel Acuna. Expertly crafting this saga throughout the last few years, Zdarsky and Acuna have joined forces to deliver a captivating, thought-provoking endpoint for the Marvel Universe. The series will explore the nature of being a superhero through the lens of an aged Steve Rogers who must wield the shield once more, not only to save the world, but restore the Avengers' legacy. See how the twisted Avengers' goals and efforts have become as Steve must stop an all-new lineup of corrupt heroes with startling connections to the Avengers of today. Really think that's an interesting backdrop, and I'm excited to see Steve go back into action here. Also, really love some of the teases of corrupt heroes having connections with today's Avengers. But again, I really think Chip Zdarsky needs to pare down, some of those violent, dark scenarios in order to craft, the pathos of our heroes. I feel like this was an issue in some of Chip's Spider-Man series, and I'm really hoping that he'll approach Avengers Twilight really carefully. Over the last few weeks, fans have seen Captain America's new suit and caught glimpses of new and familiar characters and covers and interior artwork. See a new Miss Marvel design in Alex Ross and Daniel Acuna's covers for February's Avengers Twilight 3. Kamala is one of the Marvel Universe's brightest and honorable heroes in Avengers Twilight. Will she continue to live up to her esteemed reputation, or has her mantle been irreparably tarnished? Yeah, very interesting moral conundrum here with so much dark underpinning surrounding all of these individual characters. Will Miss Marvel become corrupted in terms of Avengers Twilight, or will her goodness kind of soak through? We'll just have to see over in the coming months here. Avengers Twilight 3 will take Captain America off the shores of New York to the Raft, a government facility full of secrets and danger. Can Cap infiltrate it before the new Iron Man gives him the same gruesome fate as Tony Stark? Steve is the perfect character with which to see a changed future since he's been through that experience before coming out of World War II. That's so fascinating how Captain America is kind of a fish out of water, being implanted from the past over into our current history, and the fact that we're dealing with a far future version of him makes Captain America such an interesting through line for Avengers Twilight. Zdarsky explained to comicbook.com in a recent interview his ethics and moral outlooks have a consistency to them. So, seeing how he reacts to a changed America is always interesting to me, at least. And this future America seemingly perfect. So, Steve has to question whether or not to upset his fellow Americans are comfortable in pursuit of the truth. So, this cover that we have on the screen is issue 3, on sale February 28th. And we have yet another look over at a brand new cover for Avengers Twilight. I actually haven't had the chance to see this one. This is really, really beautiful line work. It must be coming in over from Daniel Acuna here. Once again, too, the sense of scale evoked over on the cover for Miss Marvel, I think, is just fascinating. I'm loving this costume redesign over for the character, too. I think the uses of the juxtaposing reds and blacks look just so beautiful over on the page. All right, well, we keep covering Avengers Twilight in these little news announcements, these little glimpses here. It looks like this is all we have to cover over from the series today, but fortunately, some of the big Marvel news stories are still incoming here as we have a brand new look at the Goblin over in Ultimate Spider-Man issue 2. This is a really anticipated series because it's written over from Jonathan Hickman featuring artwork from Marco Cicchetto. This is a really kind of seasoned creative team over in the Marvel Universe. And in terms of Ultimate Spider-Man, one of the aspects that the publisher recently announced is the fact that this series is bringing the relationship between Peter Parker and Mary Jane together in terms of the Marvel Universe again. I'm a little bit lukewarm in terms of the advertising of this series so far, because I almost feel like you can't tell a fantastic story just on the premise of a relationship alone. Plus, I don't think utilizing one of Spider-Man's oldest foes in terms of the Marvel Universe really creates a good story. So in the lead up over to Ultimate Spider-Man, I continue to want to see some interesting, some captivating story hook to really get me invested in terms of the narrative. Plus, I think Marvel's ongoing Spider-Man series with Zeb Wells featuring art from people like Ed McGuinness is just absolutely on fire right now. I think the types of stories that the main Spider-Man book is taking on are really subversive. They're a little bit different. They homage the past of Spider-Man, but they feature characters who we don't see each and every month over in the Marvel Universe either. So let's learn a little bit more about Ultimate Spider-Man 2 and see if there's some aspect of this book that I'm able to latch on to. Meet the Goblin in Ultimate Spider-Man 2. This one, of course, coming in from Marvel.com over on November 10th. On sale in February, Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cicchetto's Ultimate Spider-Man 2 introduces the Ultimate Universe's Green Goblin as the most surprising Spider-Man story of the 21st century continues. Okay, I'm captivated, Marvel, but I need you to tell me why this is the most anticipated Spider-Man story of the 21st century. Okay, I didn't really pre-look at this article. It looks like this is all we have as of today. As we mentioned with Avengers Twilight, I'm going to continue to keep researching and exploring this series in anticipation for the full debut. It looks like this one is set to go on sale over in January. It looks like across our streams today, we're really going to be talking about books that are going to be published in January, February, and March over in terms of Marvel. And yeah, I just feel like Jonathan Hickman has something up his sleeve in terms of Ultimate Spider-Man. There was a lead-up article over to this series featuring Peter Parker kind of changing into a bunch of different Spider-Man suits, whether it be Spider-Man 2099 or some other recent costumes here. So I feel like there is something that Hickman hasn't told readers, and we're just going to have to wait to experience it over in more detail. Once again here, it looks like this series debuts in January, and we have the follow-up issue that next month over in February. The artwork is coming in from Marco Cicchetto. Marco Cicchetto is an incredibly seasoned artist over at Marvel. Looks like he illustrated this cover. And I really do like some of his pieces over in terms of the Marvel Universe, but I feel like he's such a seasoned creator in terms of Marvel's artists that I would love to see a book really kind of push his ambitious line work into some new territory here. And I'm hoping with the premise that we still don't know about in terms of Ultimate Spider Man, will approach some of those elements too. Also, I think another aspect of this book that's going to be really important not only to the long term success of the Ultimate Universe, but to this Ultimate Spider Man title, is I really think Jonathan Hickman probably has to stay on board this book as long as possible. Also, we really it's so important that Jonathan Hickman really needs to tailor back the dialogue in terms of his scripts. I'm sure you noticed that we didn't cover Gods 2 this week, and I can tell you just wholeheartedly that's the reason why. I think right now in terms of some of these Hickman scripts, there's just too much dialogue. I even noticed when I was doing some additional research in terms of gods that it looks like Marvel oftentimes is trying to, release some unlettered preview pages. So it's like readers don't have any idea at the amount of dialogue that's truly contained within the book. Ultimate Spider Man is going to be a comic book that probably appeals to more people than Gods does. So I really hope Hickman and Marvel's editorial will pare down the dialogue. Chat's going insane. Let's see what chat has to say. Grayson read, Jonathan Hickman notoriously hates solicitations, so I'm not surprised about the minimal verbiage regarding the issue. Yeah, great call out. Also, I think one of the worst parts about Gods, and I don't think this is Jonathan Hickman's fault either, but I do think one of the absolute worst parts about Gods is the solicits for the issue. Avengers Inc. has some really cringe solicits too. But the way they try and like recall these alternate history elements and feature these like more relatable character aspects is just so cringeworthy. And I hope if Gods returns for like a follow-up miniseries, some of that presentation will be delivered differently. And of course, the editorial team will pare down the dialogue a little bit more. I'm also kind of like, what's the word? I'm a little bit torn in terms of Hickman because I think the Ultimate Universe was a really wordy script that had a lot of great character interactions too. Then Nada, I ain't lying if Jonathan Hickman right now is the Spider-Man of Marvel. He sells, Gods needs good marketing. I think I agree with everything you said. Yeah, I think Gods does needs good marketing because I feel like from the outside looking in, when I look over at Gods, I'm just like, who is this for? Who is this being advertised to? There's a reason why that series isn't connecting with readers, even though it seems like there has been a pretty massive marketing campaign, especially compared to some other titles that Marvel has in store. All right, let's see what other, Spider-Man comic book related titles we can really talk about today. In fact, we've been talking extensively about Gods. Let's go ahead and just take a look at this brand new preview over for the upcoming Gods Issue 3. Doctor Strange meets Marvel's newest characters in a preview of Gods 3 and an exclusive preview of Jonathan Hickman's upcoming Gods. Doctor Strange gets acquainted with Marvel's exciting new characters. Very quickly, I just want to say, in terms of Gods 2, I did think that issue was a marked improvement over the first. Firstly, I don't think there was as much sort of cringe relationship material over in the second issue between Win and Aiko Maki. I think the art team of Valerio Schiti is just doing incredible work, as we'll preview over in the third issue. And I think that some of the relationship material between Aiko and Mia the Magic Girl was actually pretty interesting over in that book. I think the elements of the Cubist Core are also very, very intriguing, as well as the Babylon events. I just wish some of the dialogue was a little bit pared down so Gods can function a little bit better as a comic book as opposed to a massive text piece. Let's go ahead and explore this brand new preview of the third issue coming in from Nnamdi Ezekwe over from CBR.com. In an exclusive preview of Hickman's upcoming Gods 3, Doctor Strange gets acquainted with Marvel's exciting new characters. Marvel's Gods 3 preview pages give readers a sneak peek of what to expect from the upcoming entry. Penned by Jonathan Hickman with art by Valerio Schiti, Gods reinvents the cosmology of the Marvel Universe. It features Doctor Strange and the introduction of the powers that be in the natural order of things, two conflicting groups of mystics and scientists who form a pantheon of the cosmic entities in the Marvel Universe. The pages also reveal the Doctor Strange meeting of Marvel's newest characters. I really like the backdrop of gods in terms of the powers that be in the natural order of things. The fact that like Wynn and Ikomaki both come from like opposite sides of that faction gives gods like this like almost Romeo and Juliet-esque backdrop. I just think the issue is that was overwritten over in terms of the first issue. Grayson CD says, yeah, Sheedy has been going crazy on art. I absolutely agree. We're right about to dive into some of the interior pages. Also have to hand it to Mateus Manhanini. I think all of these covers for Gods have been just so beautiful, so wonderfully designed. The way that this cover is utilizing some of the negative space over from like Dimitri's coat, as well as the background, is just such a beautiful design implementation. I love the fact that the logo is bleeding over this character too. And the fact that this like beanie is like exploding, giving way to more negative space, just shows so much intrigue in terms of this cover. One of my favorite elements from the previous Gods issue 2 was how they introduced the character of the Black Swan coming back from Jonathan Hickman's New Avengers books. I always love it when writers craft what I call a meta-narrative, where essentially they take plot threads over from some of their previous comic books and implement them back into their newer ones. Black Swan was such an intriguing, apocalyptic-esque character that brought out so many great story scenarios in terms of New Avengers. Very excited to see how she contributes to the lore of gods. This is the first page in the series. Really, really beautiful layout and design over from Valerio Schiti. In fact, this page is absolutely breaking my mind. I think you're seeing some of my eyeballs just like pop right out of my head here. The panel borders over in the bottom right portion of the screen with Dimitri talking to the mysterious beanie figure are just so intricately designed and laid out. Just so incredibly beautiful. Love how we can see Dimitri over in the background with this just hulking monstrosity as well. Regardless of what you feel of the narrative or the presentation of gods, I just don't think you can argue that the artwork is anything less than incredible. Also, we talked about some of the lore elements on this page, but this is yet another incredibly complicated design. The way that this panel is over in the background, featuring these two smaller ones that are bleeding over and bleeding into this next piece, which is actually the largest panel in the page, is striking. And we have this final panel on the page featuring Steven's kind of backside, featuring Steven's back, giving way to two more panel bleeds featuring more negative space. I think this is just an incredible work of comic book art. Once again, lots of the same techniques utilized here. Really interesting panel borders, interesting shapes, beautiful colors, beautiful sense of distortion over in terms of the visuals here. Also, we can see really strong character details, character interactions over between Doctor Strange and Wynn in this page. I do appreciate that more kind of subtle humor that Gods has, even if it isn't always evoked in the right sense over on the page here. I feel like Gods at least has a very strong, writing presentation in terms of the tone. Really love the intrigue built up over on this last page too. This is a more simple page layout over from Schiti, but I think it really gives way to his impressive visuals and perspective. I think the way the panel is pointed at each of these individual panels on the page definitely pulls out all the intrigue in terms of the narrative here. Really think that Gods is just absolutely amazing in terms of these visuals. Let's read a little bit more about the description for the issue. Cassandra is cursed with knowing the future, but no one believes her. There are black swans in the bar. Oblivion wants to drink alone, but kids these days don't respect authority figures. Most of the ingredients are illegal outside of Hell's Kitchen. So, in terms of the solicit over for Gods 3, I actually don't think this is quite as bad as some of the material we've seen previously here. God's first issue saw Win, the sole avatar of the powers that be, partnering with the opposing 100 brilliant minds of the natural order of things to stop a reality shattering Babylon event. Win teams with Doctor Strange and Clea in the series' second issue to locate Cubus Core, a proto mage long believed dead and the antagonist behind the thwarted Babylon event. Gods 2 also featured Mia the magical girl, a mystic in the making, recruited by Win's ex wife Aiko Maki. Marvel calls Gods a once in a generation title that sees Marvel's pantheon of cosmic characters torn down and built back up with fantastic new purposes. Hickman is grateful for the opportunity to explore the new world and characters of Gods and praised his collaborators. We don't get a lot of opportunities to try out brand new properties in the current market. I think this presents not just a solid effort by the company, but a real swing into the fence by Valerio, Marde, and I and everybody involved in the production of the book to put something new out there. And I also just want to take a few moments to mention just the gorgeous colors from Marte Gracia. Gracia's palette just adds so much additional perspective in terms of these preview pages over for Gods. All right, well, that was our preview, our deep dive into this next upcoming issue of Gods, and just a more candid conversation about some of my feelings toward the series so far. I really think Gods just must pare down the dialogue and be edited a little bit more closely in these upcoming issues, and I really hope that this series is going to appeal to more readers as time goes by here. All right, let's see what else we have to jump into today aside from Gods. This is actually a really busy week in terms of Marvel's news stories, and we have a upcoming comic book that I actually never expected to see. This is a brand new title for Marvel. Let's go ahead and explore the publisher's upcoming Night Thrasher series. Night Thrasher leaves the 90s behind him in a brand new solo series. It looks like this comic book was announced over on the This Week in Marvel podcast. Night Thrasher returns to the spotlight this February by a new series from writer Jay Holtham and artist Nelson Daniel. Night Thrasher is remembered for his super cool adventures throughout the 90s in both his solo series and as a core member of the New Warriors. Now he's back as a headlining hero in this 4-issue limited series, leaving the 90s behind him and entering an exciting new era. Night Thrasher will adopt a brand new look, rekindling his relationship with Silhouette in clash with an all-new arch-enemy. Holtham, known for his work in both comics and TV series, including Cloak and Dagger and Jessica Jones, will team up with acclaimed artist Nelson Daniel to steer this fan-favorite hero in a bold new direction. All right, so this article is coming in over from Marvel.com. I really think in terms of this Night Thrasher book, there is just so much potential in terms of this character. Right now, there's so many Marvel superhero adaptations. I love the fact that the publisher is taking on one of the off-the-beaten-path characters over in the 90s and giving them some more implementation. I think the creative team is actually pretty cool here. The fact that Jay Holtham already has some experience with Marvel characters over in TV series like Cloak and Dagger and Jessica Jones, very cool. I know I've heard of Nelson Daniel before, but can't quite place where I've heard his name. It's time to thrash the night. The death of a loved one draws Dwayne Taylor back to New York City, though his days as Night Thrasher are long over. But Dwayne finds the past difficult to outrun when Silhouette, his ex-teammate from the New Warriors, seeks his help against a new criminal called the OG, and the mystery of the OG's true identity and what's to come will change Night Thrasher's legacy forever. Marvel should probably be, investing more resources towards publishing a New Warriors comic book. I could definitely see the House of Ideas trying to adapt some New Warriors material in terms of Marvel over in the very near future. Would love to see like a really big creative team, take on that series. Somebody like a Jed McKay, a Christopher Cantwell. I really see some potential over in terms of the New Warriors. Discussing the series with host Angelique Roche, Holtham said, Obviously, there's a ton of 90s nostalgia floating around. It feels like a dude on a skateboard is always going to be cool and fun. I'm from the 90s and I've aged, and there's a lot in this that is about what's your legacy, what have you left behind, especially because we have seen him for a while. He had to go on a journey of self discovery and hung out in other places for a while to process that I was dead and I wasn't dead. And then what's the world like? It's mostly about him coming home to deal with the crap that he has not dealt with. Yeah, so this is a character who looks like he's been abused by Marvel's continuity. I think it's going to be interesting watching him come to grips over in terms of his new lease on life. Also, I think in terms of Night Thrasher, the comic book discourse must evolve to talk about him in a context other than this really cool dude from the 90s with a skateboard. God, I hope that this series is the one that's able to create more of a legacy over for the hero and show maybe the rest of not only Marvel's like audience, but the creators that Night Thrasher is a cool character. It's funny because this series features just so much potential over in the Marvel Universe for an underutilized character. There's a lot riding over on this debut series over for Night Thrasher. This is a 4-issue miniseries on sale in February, and this cover that we have on the screen is coming in from Alan Kwa. Once again, this is written by Jay Holtham, featuring art from Nelson Daniel. All right, so that was a preview over in Marvel's brand new Night Thrasher series. Really hoping that that comic book has the level of quality that I'm hoping for. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about an upcoming DC comic book that we've previewed countless times that I'm just so hyped for. It's coming out this upcoming Tuesday. This is a preview over for Outsiders issue number 1. Get hyped. If you've ever read Planetary before, then you definitely noticed that this is a cover homaging that series, even featuring a new character of the drummer returning over to DC. Plus, we have Kate Kane operating as Batwoman alongside Luke Fox over in this series. The Outsiders are really exploring some of the secret archaeology in terms of the DC universe to find some of these secrets. I always love it when Kate Kane features an interesting roster of heroes over in her solo books. So I'm excited to see how she can operate in this team dynamic over in Outsiders. By the way, this is coming in from Adventures in Poor Taste. DC Preview Outsiders 1. Explore the forgotten corners of DC's multiverse with Batwoman and Luke Fox. A universe of secrets is about to come to light. Batman protects Gotham City from evil. Batman Inc. protects the rest of the known world. But what of the unknown world? What of the ancient evils and hidden tombs and forgotten tragedies from a magic and mad science-fueled superheroic century? Using his fortune, Luke Fox launches a new organization dedicated to shining light into the world's darkest corners. His first recruit, Kate Kane the Batwoman, who will embrace her military background and protect Luke's dream and encounter every bit of strangeness the DCU has to offer. Just wait until you meet the third man or learn what universe-shattering secret they've buried under Antarctica. Outsiders is the return of comic book archaeology, digging into all the forgotten corners of DC's history to preserve, record, and better understand the true nature of the DC multiverse and the forgotten stories that make up its fabric. And this series is written over from Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing, featuring art from Robert Carey, colors from Valentina Taddeo, and letters from Tom Napolitano. This is the first page of DC Comics' brand new Outsiders series. I think the way Robert Carey has designed this page is quite stunning here. Really like some of the text pieces featured on the left and right, teasing the fact that Amanda Waller may have something to do over in terms of this narrative. Also like how Kate Kane is kind of throwing this batarang and we can see a mysterious hand catching it, who is none other than Luke Fox here. I really found when I was checking out this preview earlier that Luke and Kate have this great narrative and camaraderie in terms of this Planetary series. I love the fact, too, that Kate is a little bit more trepidatious towards Luke over in this preview image as well. Also think that some of the layouts on the page featuring this background featuring this one panel as the background for the entire page is quite fascinating as well. Over on this next sequence, we just get a bit more character interactions in terms of Luke and Kate here. Definitely can see Kate having so much personality here. She says, "Every year, Gotham City goes to war over some new superhero grudge. I'm tired of it. I'm done." Luke says, or no, this is coming in from Kate. "If I'm gonna fight until my fists bleed, I'm gonna do it for something that matters. So you can stuff all the inspirational but your superhero platitudes right up your..." And then over in response, Luke is kind of pitching the idea of the Outsiders over to Kate as a team of heroes that's going to do something a little bit different in terms of DC and explore some of the archaeology. I also really appreciated in this preview how Kate directly calls Luke out and some of the other DC superheroes for the Gotham War. It just seems like she's been relegated over to the background as some of those narrative elements here. So the fact that she's really looking to join the Outsiders as a direct repercussion of the fallout over for some recent continuity events, I think really makes this Outsiders title so intriguing. On this final page, we can finally see the characters spring into action, and it looks like Kate is really considering Luke's invitation to join the Outsiders. Also found that Robert Carey's darker implementation of the art really caught just an interesting sense of design on this next sequence. Really like the lettering and the sound effects from the background and the way that Kate is using this kind of stealth opportunity over to her advantage in the series. And then we're teased at the really strong kind of aspects that Luke Fox has over in terms of the Outsiders organization with this massive ship that he's operating here. Really intrigued to check out the full issue, and I think these first couple preview pages definitely created a very interesting narrative over for Outsiders 1. This is really set to be an ambitious new series over in terms of DC Comics. I really think the sky is the limit, and I hope that the fan reception is going to be strong over to this book. I just think having a narrative that takes on some of these aspects of archaeology and is looking to delve beyond fisticuffs definitely lends an interesting perspective over to the world of Outsiders. We'll have a full review over for this series on Tuesday. I hope you're just as anticipated for this new comic book as I am. Hey, let's talk about something that I'm really not anticipating in terms of DC Comics, but now that I'm hearing it, it's starting to make a lot of sense here. I think The Last Days of Lex Luthor, this upcoming Superman story, actually had a really phenomenal first issue, but it seems like readers have been waiting a long time to get the follow-up. Let's read a little bit more about DC's brand new Superman follow-up issue here. DC pushes back new Superman series second issue again. Wade and Hitch's new Superman comic won't be coming out for quite some time. This one is coming in from Zachary Camiglio over on CBR.com. The newest issue of Mark Waid's recent Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor faced yet another publication delay after a restructuring of DC's release plans for upcoming comics. As reported by Popverse, DC recently announced that the second issue of Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor is no longer coming out in December as originally planned. With no specific release date currently provided, the publisher revealed its current publishing schedule for early 2024, on which the book does not appear, meaning it currently is not set to hit shelves at least until February 2024. The delay comes after a previous setback, as the first issue came out all the way back in July and sold out so fast that DC had to announce a second printing, which never hit store shelves since the company canceled it shortly after. That is so crazy. DC has an incredibly successful series, but is having to push it back repeatedly here. And plus, I think there's so much strong fan reception, about that first debut chapter over with Mark Waid and Brian Hitch. I think it's a shame that this comic book has had so many publishing snafus. Now the book faces a further delay, with lead artist Brian Hitch citing that the issue is coming along slowly and that the first issue was published prematurely, which set people's expectations for a follow up much sooner than realistically possible. I know that comic book art is just incredibly difficult to illustrate here. I feel like the bar is so high in terms of these visuals over for these individual issues. And the fact that, these artists are trying to turn around these comic books in like less than a month is just absolutely staggering here. If Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor is delayed in terms of the art, I just absolutely have to extend some grace over to Brian Hitch. I think Hitch has really contributed some excellent work in terms of Marvel's relaunch of the Ultimate Universe too. Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor comes from Daredevil and the Flash comic book veteran Mark Waid, with Brian Hitch as the main artist. As the title implies, the story involves a dying Lex Luthor, Superman's arch nemesis, enlisting the Man of Steel to find a cure for a mysterious illness that is quickly killing him. Despite his crimes, Superman must put their differences aside and embark on a journey across space and time to save his longtime enemy. According to Hitch, he and writer Mark Waid were only about 4 pages into the second issue at the time of the first book's release. Ooh, that is so bad. That is so bad. So it's like the problems for the delays of Superman The Last Days of Lex Luthor, it almost feels like this is DC's fault for just not having a clear vision in mind in terms of the narrative. And plus, Brian Hitch is just so busy in terms of all these different Marvel and DC projects he's juggling. Reportedly, the publisher asked for a release window for the issue that Hitch felt was unrealistic. Hitch is known for his highly detailed, stylized work that has led to delays for other series in the past as well, such as his work on Justice League of America and The Authority, which both saw several delays. Some even saw replacement artists to take over to finish the book in a more timely manner, though fan reception suffered as a result. The second issue of The Last Days of Lex Luthor currently has no set release date. Yeah, I think we really need to extend some grace in terms of what Brian Hitch is contributing to this book. It is so difficult to draw like such a detailed, elements over on the page. Just look at the shading in terms of this character's beard. The amount of lines that Brian Hitch lends over to these comic books is just absolutely staggering. Plus, I know that Brian Hitch has gotten a lot quicker in recent years too, so he probably just has so much material over on his plate. All right, let's go ahead and keep the intrigue going here. We have another preview for an upcoming DC book that I'm really, really highly anticipating. I think DC's Green Lantern comic book series, written by Jeremy Adams, featuring artwork from Zermanico, has just created a really fascinating story scenario for Hal Jordan and his like arch nemesis here, Thal Sinestro. So one aspect about this new Green Lantern series that's been incredibly intriguing here is the fact that Adams has really spent so much time building up to the conflict over between Sinestro as well as Hal Jordan. If Jeremy Adams really rushed towards this scenario in the first issue, I don't think the comic would have had quite the same impact. I'm also really intrigued by DC's current Green Lantern franchise. They kind of split into 3 different Green Lantern comics between the Alan Scott series, Green Lantern War Journal, and this main Green Lantern title. I think all these books are just really fantastic in terms of DC's publishing line right now. But there's something epic about the confrontation between Hal and his arch nemesis Sinestro here. I'm also intrigued by the text featured over on this cover, stating Rage of the Red. If Sinestro has taken on a red lantern ring instead of a yellow one that he's used over in the past, that'd just be a great way to like mix up some of the continuity elements in terms of Green Lantern as well. Let's go ahead and explore a little bit more about Green Lantern 5 in this new story from Adventures in Poor Taste. Thal Sinestro's Red Lantern Rage. Sinestro has seized control of Ferris Air as the rage builds to cataclysmic levels within Hal Jordan's most vicious adversary. The power of the Red Lantern Ring has turned Sinestro's wrath into a planet-wide fury. Hal's only hope to break United Planet's law and lure the villain out into the final frontier. Then, In Rise of the Sinsin Part 2, Sinsin's plan becomes clear. To claim his legacy, he must seek out his father and face him in combat. The march towards Sinister Sons continues with this epic prequel installment. All right, so this solicit very, very cool. It is absolutely teasing the fact that Sinestro is definitely planning to take on the Red Lantern ring. Yeah, I think that is such a cool way to just mix up Marvel's continuity elements very, very steadily. And I think there's been a lot of build-up to Sinestro kind of getting his groove back in terms of the DC universe within those Night Terrors Green Lantern issues as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the preview artwork from Zermanico and Romulo Fajardo Jr. Zermanico's line has been so unconventional. I think Zermanico is so strong at capturing these adept facial expressions that carry the subtext over in terms of Green Lantern. I want to read you some of Sinestro's direct lines of dialogue written by Jeremy Adams. They're just fantastic. Complacent. The people of this planet have become complacent. You elect politicians that weaponize greed. You have let the lawless run rampant in your streets. You have allowed your children to be exploited, your females to debase themselves, and your men to whimper about what goes on around them without ever lifting a finger to help. You have claimed weakness as strength, but no longer. Sometimes, to break the shackles of complacency, you must be confronted with the fragility of your existence. You must be exposed to the lawlessness you have turned your backs to. You must feel the full fury of fear. Yeah, one of the really interesting elements in terms of this Green Lantern issue is how Sinestro is referencing fear, which is the entity over of the Yellow Lantern, when the solicit and cover are both teasing the fact that Sinestro is going to take on the Red Ring of Rage over in this title too. Also, I think Jeremy Adams and Zermanico just do a wonderful job pacing this series as we're introduced to a speech over for Sinestro on the first page, which is a little bit boring. It's really trying to get your guard down. And then over on this next page, we're revealed with this ginormous explosion, teasing so much intrigue in terms of the narrative. In this next sequence, I think that sense of perspective coming in from Zermanico and the way that he frames these panels really shows just how adept of an artist he is. I think that this Green Lantern series has just done an excellent job focusing in on the character interactions between both Hal Jordan and his ex-partner here, Carol Ferris. We're also seeing Sinestro really stage an assault on Carol Ferris's company, Ferris Air, as well. So this is a very personal story, not only for Hal, but for Carol too, in terms of the narrative. I've really enjoyed some of the romantic aspects between between Carol and Hal played up over in this Green Lantern title. The way that Carol continues to sort of cringe at Hal issue after issue, but actually needs his help in some later aspects of the series has definitely portrayed their relationship in a really, really interesting way. Currently, Carol is actually proposed. She's actually engaged, and I'm wondering if Hal's reappearance has just doomed her relationship entirely. Absolutely love some of the storytelling on this next sequence. There's a really bold use of negative space and a very interestingly rounded shaped panel serving as the background for the series. There's also really epic, just kind of planes flying through the air, referencing Carol's company here. All right, and that was our brief preview, taking a look at the next chapter of Green Lantern. I think this series has just done a fantastic job building the animosity between Sinestro and Hal Jordan issue after issue, and we're finally going to go ahead and experience these two face off one-on-one in very, very soon upcoming issues of Green Lantern. All right, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. I will be right back in just a moment here. Okay, thank you so much for sticking with me here. Let's go ahead and talk about a brand new upcoming Marvel series that was actually just announced over on November 9th, just a few days ago. This one is Giant Size Fantastic Four Issue 1 coming in over from Marvel.com this February. Learn the real meaning behind Imperious Rex and Fabian Nicieza and Creasley's Giant Size Fantastic Four Issue 1. So Marvel is actually starting to publish more of these giant sized comic books. The publisher actually recently announced a Spider-Man series that we're going to be previewing in a little bit more detail very, very soon here. First, let's read about what Fabian Nicieza and Chris Lee have in store for Giant Size Fantastic Four. In 2024, Marvel is proudly bringing back giant size comics, more monumental and earth shaking than ever before, honoring the 50th anniversary of the epic giant size storytelling of 1970s. These new giant size issues will be home to pivotal status quo shifts, exciting first appearances, and dramatic developments. Well, I like the fact that Marvel is at least saying that there's going to be some big things happening in terms of these giant size issues, whether it be new character reveals, new aspects of the narrative here. I think this cover over on Giant Size Fantastic Four 1 coming in from the incredibly busy Brian Hitch is just so bold and dynamic here. Giant Size Fantastic Four 1 will pack startling revelations about the past and set up in a wildly uncertain future as the Fantastic Four discover a hidden secret about Atlantis in the form of Natlas, awakened after thousands of years. Be there when the ruler restakes his claim on the throne of Atlantis. Imperious Rex, Namor is imprisoned, serving out his sentence as the disgraced king of Atlantis. So when a new yet ancient threat rises from the sea, who better to leap into the fray than Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four? Embark on a giant-sized deep dive into some of Atlantis' most dangerous history and the present that can scarcely hope to contain it. Yeah, and I just want to say too, Fabian Nicieza is just a legacy creator in terms of Marvel's history. So the fact that Marvel's once again utilizing a creator in that context for a story evoking new elements of continuity, I think is very, very exciting. Previously, we've been a little bit disappointed when Marvel has used creators, like Nicieza, just to tell older stories in terms of previous continuity. But the fact that this one is actually kind of pushing the Marvel Universe forward is really, really exciting for me. Really hope that we get to see people like Louise Simonson also contribute to a future giant-sized title. As a 12-year-old who bought and still has the original giant-sized Fantastic Four run, which featured great Marvel creators of the 70s like Roy Thomas, Jerry Conway, Len Wein, Marv Wolfman, Chris Claremont, Jean Buscema, and Rich Buckler and more, it was a thrill to write this issue. Yeah, that's so cool that Marvel is able to homage, an old line of comic books just stretching decades ago. Nicieza said, I tried to follow the footsteps of those issues by creating something big and new. I came up with a character whose name and history will have Submariner fans either chuckling and saying, why did no one ever think of that? Or they'll want to drown me. I'm excited to see which it will be. And we're also teased with the fact that this is going to be a Submariner-esque new character introduced in terms of the Fantastic Four giant-sized narrative. Once again here, this issue written by Nicieza, featuring art by Chris Lee, and we have a cover coming in over from Brian Hitch. Looks like this issue is really set to take on some of the plot threads with Atlantis and feature a storyline over with Namor. Giant Size Fantastic Four #1 will feature a reprinting of Fantastic Four 33, a classic issue from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby featuring betrayal, action, and high drama in the Atlantean style. Get your first look at Natlas on Brian Hitch's cover now, and stay tuned for more giant size announcements in the months ahead. So this issue is set to go on sale February 28th and is featuring an appearance over from Natlas. Yeah, fascinating stuff coming in from Marvel. Really happy that the publisher is utilizing some legacy creators in just a slightly different context in terms of the main continuity. All right, and let's see what other stories we have to get into today. In fact, the fun with these giant size specials is still going here, as we also have a brand new cover coming in from Jae Hyung Lee over on Giant Size Spider Man 1. This was the first of the giant size comic books announced over from Marvel, featuring writing from Cody Ziegler and art from Iban Coelho. This one is on sale over in January. Next year, Marvel Comics celebrates the 50th anniversary of giant size storytelling with the return of giant size one shots like the earth shattering giant size issues of the 70s. The new line of comics will pack epic showdowns, pivotal developments for your favorite heroes. Current Miles Morales Spider Man scribe Cody Ziegler and Marvel's Stormbreaker artist Iban Coelho kick things off with a bang in January's giant size Spider Man 1. Yeah, this series is also looking so fascinating too because it features Miles going up against Dylan as Venom as opposed to Eddie. Really think this cover coming in from Jae Hyung Lee is so beautiful and just captures all the intrigue of Miles battling Dylan firsthand here. In Giant Size Spider Man 1, readers will witness a battle between the next generation Spider Man and Venom, Miles and Dylan. It's a giant sized Spidey story that can't be missed, and today fans can see an all new cover by superstar cover artist Jae Hyung Lee. In a series where I've had the luck to do a lot of firsts, I'm so stoked that I'm able to get to add Miles and Dylan's first interaction with each other to that list. Oh, I didn't know that. So this is Miles and Dylan's first interaction with each other over in the Marvel Universe here. Dylan Brock, in terms of the main Venom series from Marvel, has become a really fascinating lead character from the very first issue of that comic book from Brian Hitch, Al Ewing, and Ram V. I am just thrilled to see Dylan really sticking around in terms of Marvel's continuity and meeting just one of the most beloved characters recently in the Marvel Universe with Miles Morales. I look forward to readers seeing Iban's incredible work in another action-packed comic book featuring everyone's favorite Brooklyn-based Spider-Man. So Giant Size Spider-Man issue 1 is on sale January 10th. And it looks like this issue is reprinting Ultimate Comics Spider-Man 22 from Brian Bendis and Sarah Pichelli. It's so interesting to compare how the giant size Fantastic Four was taken an issue just published decades ago over from Lee and Kirby. And this giant size Spider-Man series has taken on an issue published so recently from Bendis and Pichelli, but that was one of Miles Morales' first appearances in the Marvel Universe. All right, so really anticipated for this giant size Spider-Man comic. I'd say out of these two releases, I'm probably the most hyped for this one. Really hoping that some of the other backdrop of the Venom series is at least referenced, with characters like Natasha Romanoff taking on the symbiote as well in terms of the Marvel Universe. Yeah, really fantastic stuff. Hope you are accurately hyped in January for the giant size Spider-Man comic book series. Next up, let's go ahead and preview a very interesting quote coming in from Marvel editor Tom Brevoort. Marvel's upcoming X-Men relaunch has a writer, an artist, and some non-traditional choices. The upcoming X-Men revamp will have some non-traditional choices that will have some people at Marvel on edge already. So we all know that Marvel has a big upcoming X-Men relaunch that's waiting in the wings here. Tom Brevoort is set to take on, the X-Men publishing line very soon here, and we have some of the first speculation about what this new X-Men series is going to look like. Let's preview this brand new article coming in over from Graham McMillan on Popverse. This relaunch is still some months away, but the next generation of Marvel's X-Men franchise is already taking shape, according to the man responsible for bringing it into the world. At the end of October, Tom Brevoort, Marvel executive editor and the man who will take on over stewardship of Marvel's Mutant Comics at some point next year, shared in his Substack newsletter that the first script for the new era of X-Men has been completed and is currently being drawn. You know what? I think that is actually super exciting. So we're all set to see the Krakoan Age sunset over in the Rise of the Powers of 10 and the Fall of the House of X comic coming in very, very soon. Marvel is already teasing what's yet to come with a brand new X-Men comic book just being completed here. Just as an aside, I am really hoping that in the next relaunch for these X-Men titles, that the trinity of writers of Jerry Dugan, Al Ewing, and Cy Spurrier will continue to have some sort of implementation or output into the Marvel Universe. I think the publisher has just struck gold since Jonathan Hickman left in evoking, those three creators in terms of the Marvel Universe. And I really hope they stay on board their really long-term and winding X-Men series. The experience of reading the first script he shared was weird because the scale of the adventure is so great in scope. This is a far cry from building a new relaunch from the Avengers or Fantastic Four. It's relaunching an entire line of titles. I'm actually really happy to hear Al Ewing say this because in whatever context X-Men returns to in the Marvel Universe, I really want it to take on like a big event-driven, a big science fiction-esque backdrop, just like Krakoa has contributed to the main X-Men line of titles. I'm really happy to hear that Tom Brevoort is thinking about these X-Men comic books in that context. Creating the infrastructure between them that will make up the new parameters of their world and how they'll all interact with and to what degree, as well as deciding what characters will end up where in whose hands. I've done a lot of things in my years on this job, but I've never had to think so broadly about so many characters and books at one time. You know what? I almost think that Tom Brevoort maybe shouldn't be saying this as much in this context. The reason why I've been so attached, so invested in all of these X-Men comics very recently is because they all link up together. And frankly, it's just aggravating to me how Avengers feels so separate from Avengers Inc. I wish more of these Marvel series lined up a little bit closer in terms of the publishing, because I feel like Marvel would definitely feel more cohesive. But I'm very, very happy to hear that Tom Brevoort is really trying to construct an entire line of comic books together as opposed to taking just one series kind of fragmented that doesn't have anything to do with the ongoing, Wolverine title. So far, he continued, I've made a couple of non-traditional choices that made some of the folks around me edgy, and I can't even say with the certainty that they are the right choices. All I can go on is what my gut tells me that's the way to go. But in reality, it's working without a net. Yeah, but Tom Brevoort, you have to take chances, right? You can't just publish the same X-Men content that we've seen time and time again. Just, again, kind of a weird thing for Brevoort to say. That's as much as Brevoort was willing to share at the time for good reason. I'm going to really continue to hold back from saying much of anything about the specifics for some time yet, as really the spotlight should be on the efforts of the current crew as they build the end of their time on the franchise. After revealing that the first script needed a revision to its finale, the last 2 pages or so before being handed to an artist. What writer is on the title, what artist, Brevoort is remaining quiet for now. Please be patient and try not to ask me too many questions about what costume Wolverine is going to be wearing and what book you can find Rockslide in or anything. It's not my time yet. And by the time we get there, like it or not, we'll be ready. We're just not there yet. When will we get there? Marvel hasn't given anything resembling a timeline just yet, but given that the publisher recently announced the 4-issue X-Men Forever series, the final chapter, for real this time, of the end of Krakoa era of comics to launch in March 2024, it would be a safe bet to assume a summer 2024 relaunch. Here's hoping everyone survives the experience. Indeed, we're really just waiting for X-Men Forever to wind down. And then I assume as soon as that's done, Marvel's going to jump in there like the very next month and release the next upcoming slate of the X-Men series. In fact, I think we can likely expect, some new information in terms of the X-Men comics probably early next year, I would imagine, given right now that we're in November. Grayson Red says, damn, they going back to the mansion. I can feel it. Smack my head. Grayson Red, God, I hope that doesn't happen. I was looking at like a different X-Men medium. I don't know if it was like X-Men 97 or something, but seeing these characters put back together like in the mansion and their most like cursory status quo element just feels like remedial, I think is the word I would use. I really want this upcoming slate of the X-Men relaunch to take on as many plot threads as possible and really show readers that the X-Men franchise has kind of moved forward, from the original five mansion days over in the series. I actually think that even though in this kind of interview or in Tom Brevoort's Substack, he actually brought up some really interesting elements about how this series is going to be structured that we mentioned earlier with all these comic books syncing up together. I actually think a lot of what he talked about here, even though he said most of it begrudgingly, actually sounded pretty good in terms of what Marvel had to offer. So there's actually a ton of X-Men stories that we're going to be diving into right now, and we're going to talk about a brand new X-Men comic book that I'm actually not excited to talk about at all, but I at least want to preview and give some context for. It looks like Marvel is going back to the past with a new original X-Men series. This sends the team on a mission from the Phoenix. In a special first look at original X-Men, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Iceman, Beast, and Angel receive a multiversal mission from the Phoenix. Thanks to the Phoenix Force, Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Iceman, and Angel will defy space and time once again. Once this team of X-Men traveled into the Marvel Universe's present and met their future selves, now in Original X-Men by Christos Gage and Greg Land, they'll find themselves in another universe entirely. Sent across the multiverse by the Phoenix Force, the original 5 X-Men will face a challenge unlike any they've seen before, and the stakes couldn't be higher. As a special look at Original X-Men finds the X-Men running into the Phoenix in a mind-bending kaleidoscope environment. In one page, Phoenix brings down the fire, revealing multiple versions of herself to the immobilized X-Men. In another, she runs through several memories, including ones where the Phoenix obliterated villains such as Thanos and Ultron. Finally, she speaks to the younger Jean before sending them on their way. All right, the reason why I'm not super thrilled about this series, aside from the just strange artwork from Greg Land and the way that he really contributes some like faces and expressions, is just the fact that I really don't think that this comic book syncs up with the rest of Marvel's publishing line. It feels like this comic book has really taken the air away from the main Jean Grey series and is just bringing Marvel back to a more like remedial aspect in terms of their continuity. Frankly, I don't think Marvel has to publish, this many X-Men series. And I don't think, having these creators creating as much product as possible always leads to the best end result here. Also, I really find Christos Gage to be hit or miss depending on what comic books he takes on. This series is set to go on sale December 20th from Christos Gage and Greg Land, and the main cover for the comic book is illustrated by Ryan Stegman. And that was just a brief look over at Marvel's original X-Men series. Definitely wanted to go ahead and cover that in some capacity. And I wanted to explore yet another really fascinating comment that editor Tom Brevoort made about the upcoming brand new X-Men relaunch here. Let's go ahead and get into that one right now. There's not enough viable black male characters in the X-Men according to new Marvel Comics boss. Brevoort tackled a question about inclusion in the latest entry to his newsletter, Man with a Hat. So this one coming in from Popverse by Grant Desarmet. If you've been keeping up with X-Men comics in the past couple of years, it may surprise you to learn that Marvel has even bigger plans for its multitude of mutants. They've already been to Mars, become immortal, and established their own nation. But now the X-Folks are taking on an even bigger role, Marvel's biggest brands. And, with more focus than ever on the X titles, there's one issue that their commander-in-chief feels should be addressed: a lack of viable black male characters. I think it's always good to, have more inclusion and introduce some new characters in terms of the Marvel Universe. I feel like these X-Men comics are so ambitious in terms of their like plotting and backdrop, that introducing a character kind of pivotal to continuity would be a great way to kick off the new line of X-Men comics. Would love to see maybe a new, kind of person of color leading this next round of X-Men. Also, I think, some of the characters in the core Marvel universe too have been taking on some interesting direction here. I need to research this. Give me just one moment. Let's see. Yeah, right now the character of Sync is leading the underground X-Men in terms of Jerry Dugan's core X-Men series, and I think there has at least been some positive change in terms of Marvel kind of publishing these diversity-esque heroes, but I'd still love to see more of a focus on this in the near future. I think actually having Tom Brevoort call this out is a really important way to push the medium forward too, and just get more representation and fan interest over on some of these titles. Let's back up for context. The person making this statement is longtime Marvel shot caller Tom Brevoort, whose time editing Avengers titles like Civil War, Secret Invasion, and Secret War made him a notable actor in the history of the publisher and at least partially responsible for some key storylines in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In August, Brevoort announced on his Facebook page saying that his attention was turning from the Earth's mightiest heroes to the Uncanny Avengers, saying, "After a quarter of a century editing Avengers and its associated titles, I'm going to be moving away from those characters and titles and instead stepping into the world of the mutants." Grayson Red says, "Interesting, I'd like to see that. New characters and more representation keeps things fresh." Yeah, really glad to hear you say that, Grayson. Totally agree here. Today, Brevoort answered questions on his Substack about that world of mutants, and at one point, touching on the topic of diversity in the X-Men team rosters. Specifically, Brevoort was asked, "How do you find that balance of wanting more diversity, but making sure it doesn't come off forced?" Admitting that the question was a complex one, and that he's not sure that I'm going to be able to do it justice here. Brevoort spoke about the balancing act of using fan-favorite X characters, while also addressing long-standing gaps in representation. Just because there are some particular types of characters that I see a deficit of in the X line, that doesn't mean those deficits are going to be immediately addressed. They become more of a general guidepost for development as we go. I think also Tom Brevoort is saying the right thing here. He's saying he's not trying to rush into the diversity elements, but he's trying to kind of pilot this ship to steer towards those elements too. I think implementing, some of these aspects more naturally, like having Sync as the leader of the Underground X-Men, could push this franchise like in a more positive development too. So how are those guideposts followed? Earlier in Brevoort's message, he says it comes down to the creative teams. Well, I mean, Tom Brevoort does have control of the X-Men line of publishing, right? Like, he could essentially just say, like, let's make sure there's a little bit of representation in each of these individual X-Men titles. Just a very strange answer in terms of that. Specifically, he says, this typically comes down to which character the writers that want you to bring on board want to write about, which ones speak to them, which ones they want to tell stories about. As of this writing, we're still waiting to hear new creative teams behind the X-Men books. And now that we've heard what's on the mind of the editor behind the stories, it'll be interesting to see how and if they address a demographic he considers lacking. Whatever the answer, Brevoort also admits that the inclusion is a process that doesn't come to an overnight solution, but whatever progress is made, there will still be more to make. There will always be more work to do, but you can only do so much at any one time. Yeah, definitely agree. And I think that some of the representation and some of the answers we've gotten about how Tom Brevoort is really assembling the new X-Men line of titles, I think has been pretty intriguing here. I really like in that last piece how he referenced the fact that these X-Men books are going to be more cohesive. And I think implementing some more diversity into the narrative is also going to help tell even more like interesting and thought-provoking scenarios for X-Men comics over in the very, very near future. All right, and I know exactly what I want to go ahead and cover right now, but you're going to have to give me just a moment to pull this one up. Grayson Red, I'm old enough to remember the intense hate that Miles Morales got initially. If they make a good character and don't get gun shy, we could get some really awesome stories. I totally agree. I totally agree. I was actually having a flashback the other day to when Miles Morales was like first announced, and I remember like when it was going through like the news cycle, and there was so much like conservative backlash towards his implementation. I remember it drove me crazy too because I think the first couple issues had debuted and I really really liked them, and like the fact that people were like so like dead set against Miles Morales for no reason drove me absolutely wild. So happy to hear you post that comment over in the chat. Also, God, I remember when Jane Foster was announced as Thor, there was some very weird pushback on that too. And that news story was announced over on The View. If that View segment is still available, yeah, you need to see it. Just really, really weirdness in terms of Marvel's like multimedia rollout for news stories. Man, the way that people react to comic books is just so weird sometimes. Okay, so I actually want to go ahead and dive into an upcoming series that I'm really, really excited about here. We've been covering each and every issue over on the channel. This is a look at DarkXmen issue 4. Frankly, I am so excited. I am so interested in Marvel's current Spider-Man run written over from Zeb Wells. And I love how this series still carries a connection over to the core Marvel Spider-Man comic with the character of Ben Reilly. Before Zeb Wells even kicked off his Spider-Man run, he told stories centered around this character. And sadly, while Zeb Wells is not writing this DarkXmen series, Steve Fowlkes is, and Jonas Scharf is really implementing just some beautiful illustrations in terms of the narrative here. This book is set to, feature the return of Ben Reilly as Chasm over in the Marvel Universe. Ben Reilly is the clone of Spider-Man, and his memories were manipulated by the mysterious Beyond Corporation. He as a character is really going through the backslide, the downslide as a character, and watching him really just fall farther and farther and farther has been so intriguing. As a result of the Dark Web storyline, where he mounted a demonic assault of Limbo on New York City alongside Madeline Pryor. Madeline ended up reforming towards the end of that story, but Chasm was really looking to continue to exact his revenge. So he's currently being held in a cell over in the Limbo Embassy, which Madeline is operating out of. Let's read a little bit more about the return of Chasm in DarkXmen issue 4. Hostile takeover. The fiend taunting the DarkXmen from afar will leave a trail of bodies in her wake as terror falls over the Limbo Embassy. Will Chasm join the fight against Orchis or become Madeline Pryor's ultimate downfall? And can the devil ever be trusted? Before we get any farther into the preview, I just want to say here, I am very worried about the current state of the Limbo Embassy. Once again, I've loved how this really interesting narrative device has fueled story scenarios for Spider-Man and comic books like DarkXmen. I am really worried that at the end of DarkXmen, the Limbo Embassy is actually going to fall to Orchis. There's been so many Orchis raids on various X-Men characters, and it feels like our heroes are barely able to withstand their assault. Plus, the Krakoa Age is not done yet. We still have those dual miniseries upcoming. So, very worried about the state of the Limbo Embassy. Let's learn a little bit more about what Orchis is planning for Madeline and the rest of the characters in DarkXmen. Yeah, I love the shading over from Jonas Scharf and some of the colors in the issue too. This page really fascinating, features an interaction between these Orchis agents Krull and Valens that have been featured so prominently across DarkXmen. I've loved how all these disparate X-Men series have fleshed out their antagonists in so much detail. So this issue actually features an alternate version of Madeline Pryor that we've seen Orcus operate with in several preceding issues of Dark X-Men 2. And the way that Madeline Pryor is actually talking about the character of Chasm is very dark, very dreary. And also the layouts over from Jonas Scharf on this page are beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit about what the Orcus agents are saying in response to Ben Reilly. You've promised to turn Benjamin Reilly against Pryor. He's already entered inside the Limbo Embassy. What use will this mutant provide that Chasm can't? And we have this alternate version of Maddie saying, we're going to stride through the front door of the Little Queen's castle, Kroll, and this doomed wretch is our skeleton key. Man, it actually does seem like the Orcus is really about to close in on that Limbo Embassy and is really planning something devastating over for Madeline. On our next page, we can see some of our Dark X-Men characters assembling to try and save this poor mutant over from the Orcus agents lingering just in the background on the outskirts of the Limbo Embassy. I love Jonas Scharf's really scratchy line across the tail. I think it just does a wonderful job tapping into the dark backdrop of Dark X-Men 2. And Madeline is able to finally catch up with this mutant over on the next page. He's introduced as Nils Stigger, the mutant named Abyss. Madeline welcomes him over to the Limbo Embassy, but it seems like Abyss still has something on his mind. There's still something wrong here. Madeline says, "Speak up, child." And Abyss says, "I said she made me." A weapon. And there we go. We really get Jonas Scharf really introducing the full scope of the abilities from this mutant character named Abyss. In the middle of Madeline Pryor really trying to fight back against Orcus, she ends up over on this tangent with the character of Abyss. I wonder if this scenario is fueled by Orcus and if it was a trap sprung just in time over for the Dark X-Men. I think this preview is just really, really phenomenal. I love all the characters and the understating writing Steve Folks has lent to the narrative. Once again here, very, very afraid of what's in store for the Limbo Embassy, but really hoping that heroes like Chasm can, rise up and fight against Orcus alongside Maddie and the rest of the Dark X-Men characters. I hope you enjoyed our preview of Dark X-Men 4. I wish we had more material to talk about in terms of that book. It's one of my favorite comic books I think Marvel is publishing right now, actually, to date here. And frankly, just speaking in regards to the talent who should be assembled for the next X-Men relaunch, dear God, please, 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 let's get Steve Folks in there. I think Steve Folks' Dark X-Men has just been absolutely wonderful. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit and talk about another book I am very, very highly anticipating. Let's see if I can find this preview, though. All right, we're going to go ahead and venture outside the lines of the X-Men franchise and talk about the upcoming Daredevil issue. This is the third chapter of the series. This has been a great book so far, featuring writing from Saladin Ahmed and artwork from Aaron Kuder. The status quo for Daredevil in this new comic book is just crazy subversive, with Daredevil serving as a priest looking after the kids of the St. Nicholas Youth Home. Over in the last issue, it looked like one of Matt Murdock's greatest allies, Ben Urich, was set to betray him. And we have a little bit more follow-up on that storyline and this really tense and violent scenario that Murdock finds himself in here. And by the way, thank you to Adventures in Poor Taste for posting these previews. Daredevil pounds pavement and breaks bones on a crusade against the upstart gang terrorizing Hell's Kitchen. But that crusade will put Matt face to face with his deadliest enemy and threaten the souls of those closest to him. So it looks like Daredevil issue 3, written by Saladin Ahmed, featuring art from Aaron Kuder and Farid Karami. We have inks from Cam Smith and Farid Karami, colors from Jesus Abertoff, and letters from VC's Clayton Cowles. The covers illustrated by John Romita Jr., Scott Hanna, and Marcio Menis. So on this opening page, we have Matt Murdock swinging through Manhattan over as Daredevil, given some narration in terms of the captions. There's a great sense of perspective from Aaron Cooter, really illustrating Daredevil in all these interesting scenarios. We get like a close up shot in the first panel, a more far away shot framed in a really interesting, like underhead way, showing some of the aspects of New York City. And we have an extreme close up on this final panel, too. Even though from 6 stories up these streets at sunset are a cacophony of sounds and smells, urine and garbage mingling with the groan and clatter of sanitation trucks, curry and tempura layered over chatter about cryptocurrency and sports. Without meaning, I revisit some of my earliest training, the way Stick taught me to filter out 1,000 other sounds and sense and focus. I think Saladin Ahmed just does a great job, writing some of the dialogue over for the series too. Even though we have Daredevil talking about something so cliche like urine in the very next, caption box, he says, curry and tempura layered over chatter about cryptocurrency and sports. To me, that feels a lot more cohesive, a lot more tied into the elements of the Daredevil property. And we get Daredevil really kind of breaking into the Daily Bugle in order to figure out just what is going on with Ben Urich. Very weird that Ben Urich is kind of illustrating this animosity towards Matt Murdock. So we see Daredevil just scaling the building here, breaking into an office. I've spent the past several days tailing Ben Urich, a close friend and the best reporter I've ever known. In this new life as a father, God has granted me, Ben. Now the daily owner of the Bugle has no idea who I am, but he's been using an online alias to spread dangerous lies about St. Nicholas, the youth home I run. Ben's always been a champion of truth, even when it's cost him everything. What could have set him on this path of deceit? And then we see Ben engaging in a conversation over with Phil in terms of the Daily Bugle. Love the way that Matt is kind of lingering just in the background over in the ventilation system above. Also, the way Aaron Cooter just illustrates all these pictures in the background and features just these really tense expressions with so much details on the faces is very, very bold in the narrative. This is one of the most interestingly laid out pages we've seen in terms of the preview, as we can see Matt Murdock engaging in some subterfuge, kind of scaling the buildings between these two individual offices. He's saying, "This isn't the Ben I know. Something's wrong with him. Something that screams to that priest in me. The vibration pattern tells me it's a text from Javi." Father Javi says, 911, where are you? Did you forget the CPS review today? Ben will have to wait. There are fires to put out in Hell's Kitchen. Man, Matthew is so busy right now, serving as a priest, serving as Daredevil, and trying to get a leg up on just what his friend has in store. Yeah, very happy with how Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Cooter are juggling all these interesting subplots across this new Daredevil series. Really cannot recommend this book enough in terms of how it's just lent such a great and solid tone in terms of what Matt Murdock is bringing over to the Marvel Universe. Oh yes, we missed a really big X-Men story. Let's go ahead and bring that up right now. Okay, so Marvel recently released some epic brand new covers from some of my favorite artists across the industry here. Krakoa's Last Hope joins the fight in Fall of the House of X2 and Rise of the Powers of X2. We have brand new covers for the follow-up issues of these two series set to close out the Krakoa era over at Marvel Comics. It's the beginning of the end of the X-Men's revolutionary Krakoan age. Just like Jonathan Hickman boldly kicked it off in 2019 in twin series House of X and Powers of 10, the finale of the Krakoan age will be told across two intertwined series this January in Jerry Duggan and Lucas Wernick's Fall of the House of X and Kieran Gillen and R.B. Silva's Rise of the Powers of 10. It's a who's who of current mutant mastermind storytellers, and together they're bringing down Krakoa in epic style. The two 5-issue limited series will deliver a breathtaking saga across mutant history and future as the X-Men of today and tomorrow will wage the final war against extinction across their entire existence. Today, fans can peek ahead at the covers for Fall of the House of X2 and Rise of the Powers of X2, both arriving in February. The two series that are one has been where this story has been leading since the dawn of Krakoa. Polaris is coming from nowhere, and we hope you'll join us as well. This cover with Polaris illustrated over from Pepe Larraz is just so beautiful. The effects over in the background are so striking. This really kind of green hue that Polaris has in terms of her spin on the Magneto costume, I think, is just so beautiful and really recalls some of her origin in terms of the Marvel Universe. I've been absolutely obsessed with this cover and kind of toiling over every individual detail. I also really like how the kind of Fall of the House of X series feels like it takes on a more kind of like reality-based aesthetic versus some of the science fiction backdrop that we can see over in Rise of the Powers of 10. I feel like these two books differentiate themselves in really interesting and dynamic ways. I've really been happy with Jerry Dugan's writing in terms of the main X-Men series, especially with all the really fascinating plot threads he's been able to spin out of that book. I'm very intrigued to see just how far he goes over in Fall of the House of X. Also, artist Lucas Wernick is so great at depicting facial expressions, at depicting really strong political subtext for his characters, and I feel like all those elements are going to be featured prominently in the Fall of the House of X book 2. Once again, it looks like this book is on sale in January, but the second issue shipping in February. This is a 5-issue miniseries. In Fall of the House of X2, the X-Men are at their lowest spot, and they may be on the brink of complete eradication. But they're not going down without a fight. Polaris returns to guide the X-Men home, bringing a wicked surprise for Orchis. This epic tale split in two continues as the Krakoan age nears its conclusion. I can't believe we are sunsetting the Krakoan era in just a few months here. And here's our cover over from Rise of the Powers of 10-2. This one, a ton of fun, featuring a return to Rasputin 4, a character who was first revealed over in the Powers of 10 series. Really fun to have her back over for the finale of this comic book tale. This one written by Kieran Gillen, featuring art and cover from R.B. Silva. Rise of the Powers of 10 is taking on a more science fiction-esque backdrop, so I feel like Kieran Gillen is really going to be able to utilize some bold elements of narrative and just make my head spin in really interesting ways here. Also, I love the line from R.B. Silva and just the way he's able to render all the different character poses and expressions. Outside time and space comes Mutantum's last hope in Rise of the Powers of 10-2, floating between dimensions, hiding from a Dominion who wishes to crush them. Can Xavier and his crew survive? And when we find out their plan, will we want them to? The end of the Krakoan age continues, in this epic tale split in two. Check out both covers now and stay tuned for more Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 in the weeks ahead. Yeah, once again, I am just so ready to read both of these miniseries. I'm also intrigued at some of the plot threads hinted at over in this kind of solicit blurb. We hear more about this element of Dominion, which is said to be explored in even more detail in terms of X-Men Forever. Plus, we have a look over at Xavier and his new really fascinating team of crew characters taking place in Rise of the Powers of 10 as well. All right, let's see what we have in store next in terms of Marvel and DC Comics. Give me just a moment here. Okay, so we are actually going to go ahead and feature some coverage of Marvel's Thanos series that was published this past Wednesday over with X-Men Monday. This is coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste, written from Chris Hassan. X-Men Monday 226, Christopher Cantwell talks Thanos. Plus your first look at an exclusive variant for Thanos 2. Yeah, so I cannot believe how much product Marvel is currently publishing between all these disparate X-Men titles. It feels like there's so many books, but the publisher even found a space to release a brand new Thanos miniseries written from Christopher Cantwell featuring art from Lucas Pizzari. Actually had a chance to check this one out and really found it to be fascinating, featuring the character of Roberta Marshall end up getting caught in the guise of Thanos with his tractor beam, really rising the city of Fresno where she lives in a very fascinating context. Let's read a little bit more about what author Christopher Cantwell has in store with Thanos in this brand new X-Men Monday piece. Hey, Doctor Doom's in the current X-Men arc and Emma married Iron Man. See, X-Fans, it's all... Here, give me just one moment. This page did not load correctly. See, X-Fans, it all makes sense. Let's get started. Welcome back to X-Men Monday, Chris. First, I'd like to point out that despite never writing a comic with the letter X, you've now made more X-Men Monday appearances than Chris Claremont. I crunched the numbers. How does that make you feel? There we go. Christopher Cantwell getting one leg up on Chris Claremont. Cantwell says, man, I'm just owning that guy. I'm on top of the world. There's a new Chris in town. And this is the Lionel U cover over for the brand new Thanos series. You're here to discuss your upcoming Thanos series with Luca Pizzari. Obviously, Thanos isn't an X-Men character, but a pretty famous mutant features in the story. Before we get to that, for X fans who haven't added Thanos to their pull list yet, what's your elevator pitch? Cantwell says, I think this is a Thanos book you haven't seen before. It takes place in Fresno, California. That's not a joke. The entire thing takes place in Fresno in about 24 hours. There is context for how and why we got to Fresno, but we're in Fresno. We're in the salad bowl of the United States. And of course, for a very important reason. Thanos has been stuck in a black hole for about a year now or more in comics release time. Something has pissed him off so much that he's felt compelled to rip himself out and come to Fresno. He's had time to stew in that black hole and think about where he went wrong. He's arrived at a particular conclusion and is about to fix a mistake he perceives in his past choices. More than anything, this book to me is about the apotheosis of one of Thanos' most important relationships in his life. That's a solid pitch. How did the chance to write this Thanos story come about? I did a short story in Thanos' Death Notes that was a direct sequel coda to his first appearance in Iron Man 55. I really liked the story from Chris Cantwell in the Thanos Death Notes issue. It was very, very dark. Editor Will Moss really dug it, and he reached out when this project began to take shape. So I pitched him Fresno. The Marvel offices were ablaze with this Fresno pitch. People were weeping in the hallways. Finally, someone was bringing Thanos to Fresno and the Illuminati. I want to take a few moments to comment on this Thanos series since the first issue is actually released now in stores here. I loved some of the more rounded artwork and aesthetic coming in from Pizzari. I think Pizzari's a really strong Marvel artist that has a great line that he uses across the page. Also, in terms of some of Chris Cantwell's writing, I almost thought the narrative backdrop of Fresno was a little bit limiting in terms of this series. I was shocked with how little plot was in the debut chapter with Thanos. The series has been teased with these characters of the Illuminati lingering in the background, and I was all ready to see them introduced. And we don't really get that context until some of the very final pages in the issue, which I thought was super disappointing. I wanted to learn a little bit more about why Emma Frost had joined the team and if there was any sort of connection in terms of that. Honestly, too, I wanted to learn a little bit more about what Thanos' connection was with the lead character of Roberta Marshall. And I think one of the greater reasons why I didn't end up covering this one in full is because I closed the issue and just immediately wanted more and didn't feel satisfied in terms of the narrative. Hopefully, in these subsequent issues, I'll find something else to latch onto in terms of this new Thanos book, especially as we start to learn what the relationship between, the Illuminati, Roberta Marshall, and Thanos actually is. I'm not sure if Emma Frost has ever been to Fresno, but she was famously a member of the Cabal. Alongside your friends Doctor Doom, Namor, and Norman Osborn, what made the White Queen the right choice for this iteration of the Illuminati? Cantwell says that it looks like, let's see, Cantwell says that Emma Frost has had senior leadership positions before. She's been instrumental in the Krakoan Age. It made sense to bring her into the Illuminati, especially given everything that's taking up Xavier's times in the X-Books. Plus, she's married to Tony, who's historically had an Illuminati position. Tony bringing her on certainly felt plausible, but it's not like she's going to immediately play nice with everyone. You know what? I'm looking at the Illuminati right now, and it's very good that they brought Emma Frost in. They really needed just some female representation at all in the least bit to round out this team. No matter the makeup of the Illuminati, sparks are guaranteed to fly. What should readers expect from an Illuminati made up of Mr. Fantastic, Iron Man, Doctor Strange, Emma Frost, and Blue Marvel? Not to mention there seems to be a Hulk in the mix. First and foremost, this incarnation of the Illuminati finds itself in Fresno. Did I mention that it's the salad bowl of the United States? It's very flat there. Also, Thanos is there. Selfishly, and because this book came together very quickly, you know what? I can almost sense that. I can almost sense that in terms of the script. I pulled from characters I've written before. That's true for all of them except Emma. I've gotten to write Reed and Doctor Doom and the Fantastic Four Road Trip Annual. Blue Marvel was also heavily in Doctor Doom. Strange appeared in Doctor Doom and Hellcat. And Iron Man appeared in a book called Iron Man I wrote for a few years. Greedily, I've tried to put Doom and Namor in the Illuminati as well, just to have everyone I've written be on the Illuminati, even Captain America too. But that would have been stupid because this is a 4-issue miniseries that's supposed to be about Thanos, and it's called Thanos. There would have just been talking and infighting among Illuminati members, and we would have never gotten to see Thanos, let alone Fresno. I do think that as I write characters, I feel a certain unshakable empathy for them. So that's why I pulled these folks on. I could step into their shoes quickly. The sparks are there, but there is also this very pressing real-time threat. So they have to put their bullshit aside and focus. Even the Hulk has to as well, because Thanos is in Fresno, the salad bowl of the United States. I really appreciate the sense of humor that Christopher Cantwell lends over to this narrative. Cantwell's scripts are so incredibly dark here at times, too, that having him being the voice of levity is a little bit cathartic for me. I mentioned Doom, Namor, and Osborn, all characters you've had a chance to dig into. Now Thanos. What is it about these iconic comic book villains and anti-heroes you find so attractive as a writer? Yes, we've definitely been talking about this too. It seems like Christopher Cantwell takes on some of the darkest characters in the Marvel Universe. Cantwell says, well, I'm a bad person, I'm evil, and I condone evil things. I don't think that's true. So naturally, I like to write villains. I write them because I hate good people and people who would rather live their lives without conflict and in complete harmony. I like to show the dimensions of villains and humanize them because I prefer them over good people. I think villains are better and should be in charge of everything, not just in these comic book stories, but in real life. I think that's obvious, Chris. This is a weird question to ask because it's right there on the page. I hate heroes and I love villains. End of story. The serious answer is that I see these characters on a moral and ethical spectrum, all of them. On the far end of the spectrum, you'd probably find Steve Rogers, who is a paragon. He is Marvel's Superman in a way. Tony is just to his flank. Tony's a great human being, but one who has faced some real internal struggles. He has an undying commitment to good, but he's been wrong, had trouble admitting he's wrong, and then gotten angry at himself, hated himself, and suffered a lot.
Man, I think you can see in just these last couple sentences that it just feels like Christopher Cantwell might have something more in store for Iron Man. It just felt like he connected to that character on such like a deep emotional level. And I really feel like if you read his run over with artists like Angel Unzueta, you can pick up on some of that subtext too. That was just a wonderful ongoing series. I really like the narrative that Jerry Duggan has been spinning over between Emma Frost and Tony Stark, but I do have to admit, it does feel like Cantwell's Iron Man just had a little bit of a stronger characterization because it wasn't tied into all these like disparate X-Men comics. Keeping down that spectrum, and you get good people like Namor, who at times has thought it was good to wipe out humanity and partner with Doctor Doom because he loves Atlantis and believes Atlantis has been under the thumb of an abusive surface for too long. And there are times when he's just gotten angry, egomaniacal, and done some damage, but he's also been an avenger. He's full of virtue. Keep going and you get to Emma Frost. And then you see some of the amazingly heroic things Emma has done on behalf of mutants, heroes, and humanity. She's just maybe not nice at very times in conversation and has maybe killed some people or has been a part of some sinister plots. Doom is right around here too. Doom believes he is right above all, like Namor and Tony, but also should be in charge. He also doesn't admit he is wrong. He's hell-bent on destroying rivals, not at great quality. He is killed and murdered, but he is also has this code that he abides by, and at times he advocates for Latveria like Namor advocates for Atlantis. Keep going and you'll get to Norman, a cruel psychopath, a truly warped immoralist, albeit one who is currently trying to repent. Yes, this was another really dark character that Christopher Cantwell wrote. Let's go ahead and get some representation for the Gold Goblin series. Man, I wish that Gold Goblin comic was like an ongoing or something. Yeah, so this was Gold Goblin featuring Norman Osborn trying to repent over from some of his past deeds as the Green Goblin and really take up his guise as the Gold Goblin. I believe this was published over in terms of the Dark Web storyline. It's a really great series that actually holds up and will actually deepen your appreciation of recent arcs of the Amazing Spider-Man 2. This one coming in from Cantwell and Lan Medina, covers by Taran Clark. Go check it out if you haven't already. Then Thanos thought it was a good idea to kill a lot of the universe. Thanos is exceedingly cruel at times, but even he is partnered with Silver Surfer in stories for a perceived greater good. It's all about perspective and finding that lens for the character. Sorry, that was a really long, boring answer. I'm not sure many people will feel is wrong. Let's talk about Fresno some more. What's your favorite aspect of the character? Adventures in Poor Taste asked Cantwell. I like that Emma feels very aristocratic and measured, untouchable in a way, like she immediately looks down on you. Getting into the head of someone who comes off as unapproachable is very funny because you can find an inner vulnerability and virtue, something that's protected behind the walls and diamond skin. Do you have an all time favorite Emma story? Cantwell, I really enjoy the New Mutant story where they die at the hands of the Beyonder and are just emotionally annihilated. Enter Emma Frost, who gets to step into a more mature role as a kind of imperfect mentor to them. She's not the kindest instructor and has ulterior motives, but she ultimately helps the New Mutants through their trauma. This is a character who'd recently been torturing Colossus. You see what I mean? A bad person doing good things eliminates a binary here, and dramatically is just very rich. Yeah, I feel like Christopher Cantwell could definitely write a strong Emma Frost. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else cooking on the comics end beyond Thanos that hasn't been announced yet you can tease? I feel like there's always a new Cantwell surprise around the corner. What does Cantwell have in store? Let's find out right now. My book Briar is returning at Boom next year after a long hiatus. I'm very excited about it, and a new artist has come on board in the middle of the arc. Later next year, I'm debuting a big book with Vault that, dare I say, brings back a character who hasn't been in print for 75 years. Let's see, what else does Cantwell have in store? Looks like he's also writing this Star Trek comic book, Star Trek Defiant, continues to be a rip roar every month on store shelves as well. Oh, and he's got some DC projects. Okay, we'll have to stay tuned for Christopher Cantwell's DC comics. He says, one soon and one later, both of which features characters I've been dying to write for, I don't know, decades. This is very exciting stuff. Let's stay tuned here. And I'm already working on a couple of original comic books for 2025. I'm here to stay in comics. You may hate that idea, but I'm not going anywhere. And there's nothing you can do about it. Expect some exciting social media posts on Bluesky for the next few years, ones that at least get 5 likes before getting buried in the feed. Eventually, imprints will realize their grave mistake in working with me, but it won't happen until I'm in my mid-40s at this point. I've contractually made sure of that. All right, let's go ahead and preview the rest of this news article here. Looks like we have an upcoming cover for a future Thanos issue. Plus, I can see this one has some of the backdrop of the Illuminati. It looks like Emma's diamond form is kind of separated from her body here. And I can see Iron Man's stealth suit kind of peeled back too. This cover is illustrated by Taryn Clark. Okay, we have an interesting X-Men Rhode Island image featured here too. All right, usually these X-Men Monday pieces feature more original art. This one only had a few individual blurbs here. All right, well, I want to thank you so much for coming on board our stream today. I hope you had a blast previewing all the new and upcoming Marvel and DC projects. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully around the same time. Stay tuned. Tomorrow, we are going to be discussing some brand new DC comics. Plus, we might feature some more material for Gods. We're also going to be exploring the upcoming Carnage series over from Marvel too. Thank you so much for stopping aboard, and we'll be back tomorrow for even more comic book fun.